Welcome to the Global Virtual Lecture Hall. Welcome to the AI Lectures from Tokyo. Today's topic is cognition as computation and why it failed. But before we come to that, I have a few points that I would like to make. First of all, news of the day. You know, I said, well, it's in the media, robotics is in the media, artificial intelligence is in the media. And yesterday, November 10th, 2003, there was the opening of a Robot Hall of Fame. So you all know the Hall of Fame, you know, and this is the Robot Hall of Fame. And here are a few examples. So this was opened at Carnegie Mellon University. And Carnegie Mellon University has one of the largest robotics departments in the world. And here are some robots that have been chosen by a jury. So you can look up the jury on the internet. They have been chosen by a jury as members of this Robot Hall of Fame. And of course, I'm sure you all know the one that's shown in this picture, you know, R2-D2. R2-D2, you know, from George Lucas's Star Wars movie. And R2-D2 is of particular interest because we will encounter him again. The American here, if you look at this, the American philosopher Dan Dennett uses R2-D2 to illustrate an important problem in artificial intelligence, the so-called frame problem. And other robots that have made it into the Hall of Fame of robots is HAL, the Mars Sojourner. So there's a mixture between science fiction robots and, you know, real robots. So it doesn't have to be real robots. And Unimate, the first kind of robot arm that was used in General Motors assembly line. I don't know whether that's a coincidence that we only have American robots here. I think we should definitely have Japanese or Asian and European robots in here as well. I don't want to make additional comments on that. Okay. So this is the Robot Hall of Fame. Then some preliminary comments. So please register on the website. It's important that you register because we would like to create a global community here. We already have over 500 registrations. So I think the community is growing. We should easily get over 1,000. And please do use the forum for any kind of questions. I think it's better to use the forum than to just send me email. Of course, you can send me email directly, but I think posting it to the forum is better because then you get replies potentially from the entire community rather than from me only. Now, what the last point that I want to make, where the slides are concerned. So I was asked, or we were asked to put the slides up on the server for downloads in PDF format. Now, they're 95. They correspond 95% to what I have to show here, but they're always last-minute changes. For example, the Hall of Fame is something that someone sent me mail like 15 minutes ago and said, oh, here's a cool thing. Why don't you show this? And so that wouldn't be in there, but it's at least 95%, I think, accuracy there. In Warsaw, 11th of November is Polish National Independence Day, so the students will not be participating. There will be a few people there for testing the connection because last time we had problems with the connection, but they will not be directly participating in the lecture here. But I think we should congratulate them to their Independence Day, and those, I say here no problem, because we have the video streaming, so if you miss the lecture, then it doesn't really matter. You can look at the lecture from anywhere in the world And so you don't really need to attend it. But I hope that you still find pleasure in attending the lectures themselves. Okay. Now, just a brief comment on last week. So we lost the video signal to Beijing. We don't really know what the reason was, but it seemed that all the internet connections between China and Europe were just interrupted. I think it's something entirely beyond our control, and we still don't know exactly what the reasons were. We know the reasons in Warsaw, and we're testing that now. Also, I think we have a backup solution now for Beijing. Streaming is now operational, and I already mentioned that with the website. Now, last week we had some assignments. So one of the assignments was to read Chapter 1, and I expect you now to know what was written in Chapter 1, and if you like, you can also, the students in Zurich have to do this. They have to do the classwork exercises if they want to get credit, but you may also want to look at them just to get an idea. And then I asked you to take an IQ test yourself. Now, just out of curiosity, who has actually taken this? Now, maybe people in the entire virtual hall can raise their hand if they have actually taken an IQ test. So just that I have an impression of who actually did that. Can you raise your hand? Here. Who actually did take an IQ test? So I recommend maybe you can do that for next week. I mean, it's for those who have never done that, I think it's very interesting to actually do this at least once. Okay. Now, last week we also had a special assignment for Beijing, and now we do have, and it was about Searle's famous Chinese room thought experiment, which Searle proposed as a criticism of the Turing test. So I suppose you're all familiar with the Turing test, and Searle proposed this as a criticism. So can we now switch to Beijing, and can you take over the application sharing? Okay. Right. And we switch to full screen.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, can you hear me? First, let's warm up about the Chinese room test. Briefly, the test is that we give some Chinese question to Cyril, and Cyril use some scripts and rules, and then write a Chinese answer to us. It seemed that the Chinese room no Chinese, but the Cyril said the Chinese room doesn't understand Chinese because he doesn't understand any Chinese at all. Well, there is some flaws on the test, I think. First, Cyril said Chinese room doesn't understand Chinese based on the fact that he doesn't understand any Chinese. Well, first, let me ask you a question. Does a neuron has intelligence? A neuron is something that is the brain's unit, the basic unit of our brain. That means our brain is made up of millions of neurons. Then does a neuron has intelligence? That's the question. So I think the answer is absolutely no, because only one neuron or only two neurons doesn't have any intelligence, of course. But our brain has intelligence, of course. And then Mr. Cyril is a unit of the Chinese room. And in the Chinese room, there are other things like scripts, the roots, and so on. There's a lot of things there. And so Professor Cyril said he doesn't understand Chinese. Then he implies that Chinese room doesn't understand Chinese, I think there is some logical flaws there. And just like the example I just gave before, that a neuron doesn't have intelligence, while our brain has intelligence. And of course, there are other debates on the Chinese room. Well, in 1987, Cyril has argued that the Chinese room argument granted too much for the computationalism. Well, he thinks that he take in the first place that the Chinese program are syntactic and symbolic. Well, actually, now the computer programs cannot do that. And Churchland raised some debate about the Chinese room. He pointed out two areas. First is he gave us an example, a thought example, of course. That is the luminous room analog to the Chinese room, while he pointed out some flaws of the Chinese room. And on the other hand, he pointed out that only syntactic cannot produce semantics is wrong. And he proved that. He tried to prove that. And there is a lot of debates about the Chinese room and about the Sarah's point. Well, it is a hot area in philosophy, and there's lots of philosophers write papers on it, and they mainly discuss what is AI. Actually, these people depart to two groups. One group is hold the opinion of that the computer program is just a tool to study of our brain. It's only a tool. That group called weak AI, and others which called AI strong AI is just think the computer is not only a tool in the study of our brains, but a program computer is really a mind that just like our human. Well, it's hard to say that which is right, because now this 2 points of idea is hot discussed now. And if you are interested in that question, you can look about the two papers of the Chinese room and the luminous room. And so that's all about the Chinese room. And if you got any questions, we can discuss now, and you can write email to me. Right? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Maybe it is also possible to make these slides available on the internet. Would that be okay for you? If you make these slides available for downloading, I think that could be interesting for others. I think you made some very interesting points, and as you were pointing out, there's a lot of literature, a lot of papers that have been written about this thought experiment. You also, I think, mentioned the essential points. One is that even though Searle himself might not understand Chinese, the Chinese room as a whole might. Now, as you also mentioned, there may be another flaw, even if we accept this, namely that it starts from the assumption that we can encode natural language into syntactic rules and scripts that Searle then can conduct, and there are serious doubts that this will ever be possible. So I think, thank you very much. I think you really pointed out important aspects of this problem. Also, what you did is that you sort of anticipated the notion of emergence. You mentioned one neuron isn't intelligent, but two aren't intelligent, maybe five aren't intelligent either, but maybe 10 to the 11th neurons have the capacity for intelligence. What you're addressing here, I think, is the concept of emergence. That when you have many components acting together, that you get qualitatively different responses from the entire system than you get just from an individual or from several of these components. Okay, well, thanks very much. I think that worked very well. So I'm going to try and take over the application sharing. Okay. Thank you. So we're back here at the assignment. Next week we will have something for our friends in Munich. I will talk about that in just a little bit. Okay, now if there are any questions on someone who would like to make a comment right now from any of the sites on the Chinese room experiment or on what we discussed last week, I think we should take a question. Do we have a statement from any of the sites? Do I see someone who would like to say something about that? If not, we always have the possibility to discuss later on. Okay? Very good. So let's continue then. So we had last week's topics, and here, so we finished the Chinese room today. Chinese room. Now we have something on intelligence testing from last week, and then we have some new topics for this week. So measuring intelligence, as everybody knows, the kind of standard measure, IQ, right? Now we have an IQ test. An item from a typical IQ test. I would now like to switch to Munich. Can we switch to Munich? And I would like to ask... Hi Mark.
Hi Rolf. Hi.
So I would like you to take over and someone to answer this question. Tell us, can we switch to the Munich site?
Hello.
I would like someone to tell us what the right answer is and to explain why this is the right answer. And everybody else is, of course, invited to come up with the right answer, him or herself.
I see that some people are thinking really hard here. Is there somebody in the room who has already seen it? Here's somebody. Could we have microphone number 2, please, to this person?
I think it's the intersection of the first two that makes up the third square. So if you start on the very left.
Oh, can you speak up a little? We can't hear you. Can you hold the microphone a bit closer, please?
Microphone close to your mouth and speak slowly.
Please, we can't hear you. Okay?
I think if you take the intersection of the first square and the second square, if you start from the left or from the top, then you get the third square. So I think F would have to be the last one, or the missing one.
F? Okay, well, that seems to be a reasonable explanation. I think everybody can agree on that. Thank you very much. So maybe we can, let's see, now switch back to Tokyo. That was just, we're not going to do a whole intelligence test, but I would ask you to please do one just to get an intuition about this. And that was just a typical item. Now, as all of you know, I'm sure, intelligence testing, the IQ test, is a relatively controversial matter. And to introduce this topic, I would like to show you a video by a famous man, Karl Popper. Does Karl Popper, if I ask the students here in Tokyo, does Karl Popper ring a bell? Does anybody know Karl Popper? Okay, can we have the microphone there? No? So you don't want to comment? Okay. Well. Okay, he's kind of the champion of philosophy of science in the 20th century, and he is the one who came up with he had a very strong influence on the way science as a whole is done, and he came up with this falsification principle. Falsification principle. Just that you know. So the idea being that in empirical sciences like physics, psychology, neuroscience, which are all empirical sciences, or most sciences are empirical, except mathematics, maybe philosophy, I don't know. That hypotheses can never be proven, but you can only try to falsify them. And as long as you haven't been able to falsify them, then basically you accept them as correct. And this is basically what everybody does in science. Now, this man has obviously been thinking hard about many, many things, and one of the issues he has been thinking about is the IQ and IQ testing. And I would like to show you a short video from a panel discussion. And it's in German, and we added the English subtitles. So can we have the video, and can we switch to a full-screen mode?
Ich halte nichts vom Intelligenzquotienten. Ich glaube, dass das eines der großen Unsinnigkeiten unserer Welt ist, und es ist durchaus möglich, dass es sogar dazu führt, dass Amerika den nächsten Krieg verlieren wird, denn die amerikanischen Generäle sind aufgrund des Intelligenzquotienten ausgewählt. So, der Intelligenzquotient ist meiner Meinung nach ein absoluter Unsinn. Jeder Agriculturalist, also wie sagt man, jeder Landwirtschaftssachverständige weiß, dass die Qualität des Bodens nicht mit einer Linie gemessen werden kann, sondern dass wir eine mehrdimensionale Beschreibung eines Stück Bodens haben müssen, um zu sagen, ob was auf dem Boden wächst. Aber die menschliche Intelligenz wird mit einer eindimensionalen Linie gemessen. Es gibt schlagende Argumente dafür, zum Beispiel, dass Einstein einen niedrigen Intelligenzquotienten gehabt hat. Und mit einem Wort, diese ganze Affäre ist eine jener wissenschaftlichen Dummheiten, die nur dadurch fortleben, dass die Selbstbescheidung und Selbstbescheidenheit der Wissenschaft noch nicht sehr wichtig geworden ist.
Ist es deshalb Berechtigung?
Okay, vielen Dank. Das war also Karl Popper. Ich meine, das ist eine Meinung. This was Karl Popper. I switched to German because he spoke German. So this is one opinion out of many, but I think an important one. Now, I'm not going to go through this all. I would ask you to read about this. There is a vast literature about this. I just mention a few critical issues that you might take into account. One question that keeps coming up, is the IQ in the genes or is it acquired? Which is the famous nature-nurture debate. This is something I think that you should know. Nature, nurture. So the genes is nature, nurture is what you acquire. And then of course the question is it trainable? Can you, through proper training, increase the level of your IQ? Well, for example, if companies make IQ tests, or universities for that matter, if you train properly, can you get into a university that you otherwise would not get into? Are there cultural differences? It seems that there are indeed some cultural differences. There seem to be indications that Asians typically perform better on IQ tests than Caucasians, white people. It's strange that even though intelligence is measured with one number, that it's a good predictor, relatively good predictor in industrialized societies for professional success, which I think is an interesting fact. But then, of course, psychologists have also realized that you cannot measure sort of the entire intelligence of a human with one number, and they have developed a large number of tests. There are now, I think, about 70 or 80 different types of intelligence tests that are generally accepted and that are used all over the world. So I think this is to kind of counter the argument that it's just one number. So there may be many numbers that you need to make an assessment. Then some people talk about different types of intelligences. There's more mathematical type of intelligence, then more creative type of intelligence, musical type of intelligence, and so on. Now, recently, people are also trying to relate IQ to brain processes. Maybe you can see whether a person has a high IQ by looking at their brain processes. This is one of the things that people try to do in imaging. And then the big issue of emotional intelligence. And here I would, we typically say that females have, higher emotional intelligence. But we also say that IQ alone is not sufficient for professional success. Now the question is whether, but if you look at people in leading positions, they're still, unfortunately, still mostly male and not female. So how come then, even though females typically have a much higher level of emotional intelligence and social intelligence, that there's this misrepresentation? Okay, I mean here I can't answer any of these questions, but I just want to get you thinking about this. So this is an unresolved issue. It's a very controversial issue. Certainly, I think Popper is right that if you just take one number, this will not tell you very much about the level of intelligence. Okay. So now we come to how if we're interested in intelligence, well, how are we going to study it? Now, there are the traditional sciences. I mean, many sciences are interested in intelligence. Philosophers are interested in intelligence. Psychologists, of course, neuroscientists, biologists, and so on. The traditional way is kind of the analytic method. So you take something like a human. Psychologists are interested in human intelligence, so they take a human, they break it down into parts, and then they try to analyze these components. Now, I think there is another way in which and this is, of course, what most people do. Now, what we like to do here in artificial intelligence is actually something else. We're trying to kind of build intelligence. So this is what has been called the synthetic methodology. And I guess the slogan here would be understanding by building. So the idea is you have a behavior of interest. And I mean, I take up the statement that Professor Pöppel made last week in Munich, saying that we should, really put away with the notion of intelligence, just forget about intelligence. And I think maybe that's a good idea. So what I would propose here is that rather than asking whether something is intelligent or not, we have a behavior of interest. And, for example, how we recognize a face in an auditorium, or, how an ant finds its way back to the nest when it's found some food, or whatever, or how a rat navigates in a maze. And then we're trying to find out how it works. And we don't discuss, we say it's interesting, but we don't discuss, is that intelligent or is it not? Okay, and then basically, so we're trying to model a behavior of interest, then we're trying to abstract certain principles in order to, the idea here is that eventually we would like to develop a theory. And so what we're doing, we're actually using robots as tools for scientific investigation. Okay? Okay, I'll give you a few examples of the synthetic methodology. One is from our own research. One is navigation behavior of desert ants. So there's this beautiful little desert ant that you hear, this animal called Cataglyphus, and it lives in this salt pan here, in Tunisia. And we built a number of robots to mimic certain aspects of the behavior of this. And it's actually very interesting that when you're trying to build something, that you immediately see what the problems are. Okay. See, a biologist, if a biologist investigates an ant, the ant will still function even if his models of the ant are not correct. But if you build a robot, it will just simply not work. Another project is we are interested in the function of whiskers in rodents. So, what are these whiskers here? What's the utility of having these whiskers? And in order to do that, we're building a robot with and here what you see here, for example, these are actual whiskers taken from rats, actually from dead. We pulled them from dead rats. And the interesting thing is that they have very, very good properties. So the information that you can extract from these whiskers is much, much higher, the information content, than if you take any kind of plastics or other materials. Third example is human walking. So many people are interested in human walking. And so people build robots to investigate that, the famous Asimo robot by Honda, or the H7, which was designed and built at the University of Tokyo. And as I said before, it's an extremely powerful method. You extremely see whether something works or not. So these are the things that I wanted to. Finish or recapitulate from last week. Okay. Now, are there any questions on these points? And again, I would like to ask you to read chapter 1 before we switch to the new topics, the new list of topics. Before we switch to the new list of topics. Okay, well, if not, then let's start, okay? Today's topic, Newell, Simon, Chomsky, and Miller. This is the first one. So these are actually names that you will probably remember. I would like you to remember. And it's the foundation of the cognitivistic paradigm. Oh, by the way, cognition. Can we briefly switch to Zurich? Ria, can we switch to Zurich?
Yes.
Okay, Simon, I have a question for Zurich. Or two questions, actually. Maybe you have an answer to what is cognition? What do we mean by cognition when we say cognition as computation? And what do we mean by a paradigm?
Okay, so I'm going to ask the students. Okay, so I'm going to ask the students if they have some idea about that. So is there any answer coming from you? Or should I give
So we have two terms, cognition and what is a paradigm?
So, any idea? I mean, just try. Don't be shy. Well, it seems that it's still a bit early here in Zurich.
It's too early, huh? Too early, people still asleep. So maybe Simon, you have. Can you comment on one of them?
Maybe on cognition. I mean, it's basically the idea that we can reduce intelligence to computation only. Go back to you, Tokyo. That would be my answer.
Okay, and cognition itself, typically, I mean, cognition is used in very different ways. So I think the main idea when people talk about cognition, it refers to all those processes that are not directly connected to the sensors and to the motors. So kind of internal processes more. Although, as I said, there are many different ways in which people have tried to define cognition. If you want to know more, I can bring you a few definitions next time. Maybe I will just put some definitions into the slides next time. Okay, now what is a paradigm? What is a paradigm? I will maybe just briefly explain it. Then a paradigm is just kind of a set of assumptions in science that a community of scientists believe in, and then they do research in this particular context. And so this is what's called a paradigm. So I just wanted to make this clear because some of you may not be very familiar with the term. Okay, now the cognitivistic paradigm has its origin, of course, in classical artificial intelligence, which started in 1956. So it's almost half a century that people started explicitly talking about artificial intelligence. And there was a famous conference in Dartmouth, New England, in the United States. And at the same time, there was a conference on information. The same year, there was a conference on information theory. And there are a number of really important people that have shaped the field over many, many years. And here are two of them. Does anyone that's now here in Tokyo know who these are? Does anyone know these people? Maybe here in Tokyo? No? Okay, well, maybe, you know the names, but maybe you don't know the pictures. So this is Herbert Simon, and this is Alan Newell. And Newell and Simon, basically, for a lifetime, they have published together, and the whole history. They're kind of the fathers of artificial intelligence research, if you like. Now, at this conference in 1956, there were three really seminal papers. Seminal, meaning I can't write anymore. I can also test the technology here that the eraser works. So, seminal. Not seminar. Some people, they think I misspelled it, seminar, but it's seminal, which means very important. Okay, and Newell and Simon, they presented something called, at this conference, called LT, the Logic Theorist Machine. Logic Theorist. And it was capable of proving theorems from Russell and Whitehead's Principia Mathematica and propositional logic. So that's a simple kind of logic. And it was able to use heuristic proofs to generate heuristic proofs, and some proofs had not even been found by humans. So the machine was actually able to find some proofs that the machine had not been found, which then made Newell and Simon they claimed to have developed the first thinking computer in history. So basically, modest as they are or were, they're both dead now. They died a few years ago. Modest as they were, they claimed to have developed the first thinking machine in history. Okay, so they participated in this conference. I think this was one of these seminal papers. Now, who is this man? Are there any linguists in the virtual lecture theater? Linguists? This man from MIT? Oh, okay. Maybe not such a good picture. Noam Chomsky? Okay, does the name Noam Chomsky ring a bell? Do we have any linguists in the audience? Here in Tokyo or at the other sites? Is there in Beijing, for example? Would anyone briefly like to comment on Noam Chomsky? For example, from Beijing. Very famous linguist. Do we have a comment there, or Chomsky?
Chomsky is a linguist, and he drew a theory, the theory about grammar, which includes 4 kinds of grammars, 0, 1, 2, and 3 kind of grammars. such as regular language, content-free language, content.
Right. So it was right. Exactly. Exactly.
Etc.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Right. So he's the one that coined the term transformational grammar. That may ring a bell for some. Transformational grammar, and he published a book, probably one of the most often quoted books in linguistics, called Syntactic Structures. I think that was published, if I'm right, in 1957. 1957. Very influential, and it's basically in some sense, let's say loosely speaking, a computational theory of natural language. And I mean, now we can probably say so. It has misled generations of researchers in cognitive science and artificial intelligence, believing that all aspects of natural language can be captured in such computational rules. The third seminal paper at this conference was given by a psychologist, a famous psychologist, who wrote a very, very famous paper at the time called, with the title, interesting title, The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. Does anybody know? And he was trying to measure the content of short-term memory. And I mean, the idea was, so actually his name is George Miller. George A. Miller. If you do George Miller on the internet, I don't know, you get, I don't know how many thousands. So George A. Miller is better. The magical number 7 plus or minus 2. And what George Miller was trying to do, he was trying to measure the information content of short-term memory. Now, we all know that we cannot keep everything at once in short-term memory. You know, you have to memorize. Someone tells you a phone number. You know, it says, 0081010770966645. You have a hard time keeping that in short-term memory, right? So the capacity, the storage capacity of short-term memory is limited. And George Miller was trying to measure the capacity of short-term memory. Now, what's the measure that people normally use to measure information content or information, let's say, storage capacity, not content, storage capacity? How do you measure storage capacity? Computer scientists. Here, maybe. How do you measure storage capacity? Huh? It's trivial, you know, with bits and bytes, right? Bits and bytes. Now, Miller found that you can actually not measure storage capacity of short-term memory by bits and bytes. It varies enormously. And then he developed this concept of a chunk. And a chunk is kind of information that you put together. And then if you form the proper chunks, you can store much more in short-term memory. For example, you take a number like 010-411-635-4321, which is my phone number at my office in Zurich. Okay. Now, if I just hear this string of numbers, which is about 13 or 14 string numbers or even more, I couldn't, just remember it. But because I do the proper chunking, 010 is the international access code. Or actually, it's 1010. 1 is to get an external line from the University of Tokyo. 010 is the international access code that will get me onto the international network. 41 is the country code for Switzerland. 1 is the area code for Zurich. 635 as the number of the university, and then the last 4 digits are the extension. Right? So I do some chunking, and then I can learn even longer numbers. If I dial a number from my mobile phone, I have to dial Docomo phone. I have to dial 00913010. But I can store that easily because I'm doing the proper chunking. Okay, so that's the idea of chunks. So these are really, really interesting ideas, and they have shaped the idea. And so what was common about all this was this concept of computation. So cognition as computation. So the next thing that we're going to look at, and you remember this man, of course, the next thing we're going to look at is the notion of computation. So Alan Turing is credited, or he's one of the people who formalized this concept of computation. There were others at the same time, like Alonzo Church, and maybe others you could mention here as well. But if we want to define computation, so basically, I mean, if you look at this, we now know roughly what cognition is. So we have to see what computation is. And what Turing did, remember Turing from last week, right? So he developed the Turing test. And he also formalized the Turing machine and is one of the co-inventors of the modern digital computer. Let me just go through this Turing machine and then we take a break afterwards. So please stay with me for another few minutes and then we take a break. Okay, the Turing machine always consists of two components, a tape, which is infinitely long, and then on this tape you can write discrete symbols, but only on a finite section of the tape. And then there's a read-write head, and, well, let me just switch to the next slide. There is a read-write head, and the read-write head can read something from the tape, can read a square from the tape. It can write something onto the tape. It can move the tape to the left or to the right, or not at all. And it has an internal state. Now, here is just another way of actually dealing with the Turing machine, and maybe there is an exercise actually that we have in our exercise sheets that you can do, but maybe you can just try figure out if you have a tape, and on this tape you have something like A, B, A, B, B, A, C, C, A. And here, like this. And let's say the read-write head is here in this position, and the machine, the read-write head, is in state 1. Well, maybe that's for the break. So if you get bored during the break, maybe you can figure out how this is actually going to work. So I'm going to save this so that we can look at it after the break, if you like. Okay, now this is a Turing machine, and this is basically the definition of computation. So anything that can be computed by a Turing machine. There is this property of universality. So there's something called the universal Turing machine. Does anyone know what the universal Turing machine is? Maybe the Tokyo people here. What is universal Turing machine? I'm sure if you have had elementary courses in computer science, you're familiar with the concept of a universal Turing machine. Okay, well, maybe we can have a statement from back there.
I think that's a machine that can perform operations of theoretically, of course, it's infinite, can be infinitely long, but physically can be finite long and with finite memory. And so we have to be sure that those operations can be done in finite time. So that's at least the thing that is used in implementation of Turing machine in computers. But I'm sorry, it's not so precise as it should be.
I think you're making an interesting point about the implementation of a Turing machine. So because the Turing machine is, of course, a purely abstract machine, or a theoretical machine, if you like, and it's meant to be a theoretical machine. And, for example, if you look at this is a cartoon by Roger Penrose, a famous mathematician and physicist. And he was trying to think how you would implement a Turing machine with an potentially infinitely long tape. I think that's the point you're looking at. And, I guess the point he's making, if you're thinking of actually realizing this physically, this may be the bigger problem than the computational problem of the Turing machine itself. But let's briefly go back to the Turing machine, universal Turing machine. So the universal Turing machine is a machine that can basically simulate any other Turing machine. And so in that sense, it is the only machine we need to consider. So anything that can be computed by this Turing machine. So in the computational domain, we have this property of universality. I think this is something really important. Now, if you have the assumption that cognition is computation, then of course you have an extremely powerful means at your hands, because then basically you can, any process that can be thought, if you can think it, then you can compute it on a Turing machine. Right? So this is an extremely powerful concept. Sometimes this is also referred to as the Church-Turing thesis. Church-Turing thesis. Please read about this also in the book. Okay, here's the cartoon. And just, I think, before we take a break, functionalism and physical symbol systems, the idea there is that what counts is only the computation or the abstract algorithm, the computer program, not the physical realization. The physical realization can be electronic, as a biological brain, spike trains in neurons that were mentioned from the Beijing people. It can be mechanical. Here is an example of the difference engine. So this, may well be an intelligent system. Or, as the American philosopher Hilary Putnam put it, it could be made of Swiss cheese, which of course is very, comforting to Swiss people who like cheese. Okay, so this is a very brief introduction to this idea of cognition as computation. And here again, you have the idea that what counts is basically the program or algorithmic level, and the way it's implemented in a brain or a computer doesn't matter. Okay, now I think we should take a break. Let's take a 20-minute break. And please do ask questions. During the break, I will be available for questions. Okay, so I think we should reconvene at about 6:25, something like that. Okay, well, thanks for your attention, and see you back at 6:25. So I'm available for questions, if anyone has comments, or also if you would like me to talk about other things, then I'm happy to do so.
One question for Zurich. We sometimes have the sound quality falling. Do you also notice this? The tone?
Yes, we contact now Tokyo and we try to fix it.
Okay, thanks.
Rolf, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. I have a question concerning your sound. Your sound level varies quite a bit during over time, and we are not sure where it comes from. If maybe do you locally change the sound level, or it's maybe just because you speak in different directions?
Okay.
Relative to
so
the
one of the problems that the people here mentioned is that I didn't have the microphone sufficiently close to the mouth at the beginning, and then I moved it up, and then probably the sound level increased on average, right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How is the sound level now? How is the sound level now?
Now just before it was really loud, and now it's low.
Okay, I mean the problem with this mic, maybe I need a head-mounted microphone, because I really do need a head-mounted microphone, because when I look down on the smartboard, I talk into the microphone like this, and when I talk into the audience or into the camera, I talk like this, and then you get this variation in sound volume. So
I think this is exactly the problem. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, for next time, I think we get a head-mounted microphone. It's a bit awkward to wear, but I think it's the better solution. Yeah, something like this. Okay,
yes,
so for next time, I mean, there isn't much that we can do for today. I can just try to kind of not move my head too much, but for next week, we will have a head-mounted microphone. But is it basically, I mean, do you get the sound? And I mean, most people actually thought that the sound on the streaming was too low. Is that a problem with the sound setup, or what?
No, this was a different problem.
Okay.
The earful had just a sound level that was too low, but we solved this.
Okay.
And I think your sound level now is okay. The only problem is that it varies a bit depending on how you, in which direction you are talking.
I can try to kind of maintain a more or less steady level. But I mean, if I do something on the smartboard, then you get this. So I will try not to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Maria?
Yes, Rolf?
There was, for some time, a strange noise here in Tokyo. And the people here say, so Yoshi-san was saying that the problem was not a local problem here, but must have come from another site.
Okay.
And it was not very loud, but it was rather disturbing.
Can you describe this noise?
It was just like a buzz on very low buzz on one of the speakers or on our sound system. Huh?
Okay, so let me check. I will mute all participants, one after the other, and we will check from whose side is coming this noise. What do you think?
Now, huh? Now we don't have to.
Can you still hear this noise?
No, I don't think we do. Right? It's okay now. I'm asking. It's okay now? Okay. Now it's okay.
Okay, from our side, we can't hear it. I don't know if there's some.
No, we can't hear.
problem.
We can't hear anything either.
Okay.
It's okay now.
Rolf, what we could do is that when you hear it again, then Fukuno can tell me over the instant messaging.
Yeah. Could you, when we have Fukuno-san, when we have this noise again, that we had on the speaker here, could you send Hanspeter a message? Just if we have it again. Okay, we'll do that. I think that's the easiest. Yeah.
This is Munich. Rolf, can we speak to you?
Yep. I'm available.
I have Professor Pfeifer here who would like to take up an issue with you.
Okay.
Guten Morgen, Rolf. Hier ist Ernst Pöppel. How are you today?
Okay. That's good. I see the Munich people. Okay. Hi, Britta.
Can you hear our second microphone, Rolf?
Yeah,
I did all the intelligence tests myself some years ago.
Moment. Can you speak a bit louder?
I did all the intelligence tests several years ago, and just an anecdote. And the difference between the worst and the best was
excuse me, Ernst. The volume is very low. The volume is very low. Is it possible to?
I try to speak even louder, but I think now we have some technological problems.
I think it's a technical
problem. Can you hear
problem,
me correctly,
yes.
Rolf?
Now it's better.
Can you hear me?
Now it's much better.
I'll give him my microphone then.
Yeah, this is good. Mark's
so it's wonderful
better.
To have advanced technology. Now, what I wanted to say is the following, that I did all the tests several years ago, and I had a difference between the worst and the best test of 40 IQ points. But that was not actually what I wanted to discuss with you. The question I wanted to raise is the following. In the issues on intelligence, you mentioned that there's this point, nature-nurture. And I think what should be pointed out on the basis of some results from neurosciences is that in the first 10 years of life, there's some imprinting going on. We enter the world with the program of possibilities. Oh, this is very hard technology now. So the contacts between the nerve cells in the brain they have to be substantiated by information processing. And so there are windows of imprinting, and in these phases, up to 10 years or so, up to puberty, the matrix of intelligence is actually formed. So that during this, after the imprinting process, we no longer can distinguish between nature and nurture. I wonder whether you take up this issue during your lecture, because this actually means, on the basis of new results of neurosciences, that we have already the embodiment of intelligence on the basis of information processing. So I think we no longer should discuss, I believe, this controversy between nature and nurture. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes.
Could I communicate?
First of all, but maybe we can just leave the camera on Professor Pöppl. I mean, I just want to also point out to people in the virtual lecture hall that this comment was made by Professor Pöppl, who is the director of the Institute of Medical Psychology at the University of Munich. And I think it's about this nature-nurture issue and the process of imprinting. Now, I think what you're saying, you say on the basis of information processing, this kind of matrix of intelligence or embodiment is formed until puberty. Now, I think the information, as we will see, the information processing is, of course, a result of the interaction of the organism, largely a result of the interaction of the organism with the real world, of the embodied interaction, mediated through sensory stimulation, mediated through how the organism interacts with the physical and social environment. So, but neural development and things like that isn't really. We don't have time for that. I think what we would like to do is then demonstrate how you can actually build intelligence from the bottom up. So it's not so. I wanted to mention these issues so to kind of let people know. Okay, here's a whole set of issues. There's a whole literature about this, but I don't think we have time here to go into detail. But
I think that is a good point you're making. May I just raise one point? A few days ago, there was the 100th birthday of Konrad Lorenz, who actually was a discoverer of imprinting. And in two weeks, we will be in Beijing, and we have this Sino-German workshop in cognitive neuroscience. And I think we could discuss this issue there in Beijing with a delegation coming from Europe and also some colleagues from Japan. So thank you for your attention.
Well, okay, and so I think that's a very good point. Maybe you can give us a short report then on the discussion from this workshop in Beijing. Okay, well, thanks very much. Maria, I think there was a technical problem with the sound in Munich.
Yes, but it was a local problem.
Ah, okay. Maybe it's just a microphone, or what?
Yes, definitely. So I think, Munich, can we test again the microphone?
Das war zu nah am Mund. Da ist sozusagen reingepustet worden in das Mikrofon und dann übersteuert.
Okay.
Normalen Distanz halten. Ist das gut so? Könnt ihr mich hören?
Ja, sehr
Hallo?
gut. Laut und deutlich.
Okay, das ist gut so.
Okay, so, we still have 2 minutes left until the end of the break, so if there are questions or statements from other sides, I would very much appreciate that.
The time? Yeah, klar. Rolf, I have a student here who would be interested to ask you a question.
Okay. Yes, please. We have already switched to Munich.
Sprich.
Right. We've started out breaking down intelligence in the analytical method, and we've also started to see that there's a synthetic method where intelligence is put together from basic little elements. But I also heard of a new creationist way to produce artificial intelligence the same thing that produced our intelligence, which would be evolution, and it can also be evolution can be applied to computer programs. And I wanted to know whether we are going to get into this topic as well, because I find it pretty horrifying having lines that were not even written by humans, and no one actually, like program lines, and no one actually knows what's in them, and that actually produce an intelligence that could even challenge our intelligence, I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your point. We are actually going to talk about evolution. So evolution, as you mentioned, is a really important way, and we can deal with it computationally. And it raises also some interesting philosophical issues. There is, in fact, if you go to the website and look at the lectures, there is a specific lecture about artificial evolution and morphogenesis. So this will be exactly about the point that you're raising. And there I hope that we will have the opportunity to have more discussions. Okay, so now I think we should come back. Maybe we can play the trailer. Okay, welcome back. We are talking about the classical approach to artificial intelligence, cognition as computation. I want to make this deliberately short. I mean, there are entire courses that you can, take in most universities. I'm going to make this deliberately short because I want to show you how to do it differently. Because we're going to look at this, and then we're going to find the major problems with this, and then rather than indulging into kind of looking at what it is and in what ways it is really inappropriate, I want to you should know this, maybe then you understand why we have to do it differently, but I want to spend most of the time in these lectures on demonstrating how you can do it differently, rather than saying, how stupid the other people were who did it this way. That's not the intention at all. And I think there are some really important things that we can learn from this classical approach. Now, here's the so-called physical symbol systems hypothesis, which is another way of stating this paradigm. And it's again by whom? I think I'll switch to the other color here. Again by Newell and Simon, the people that we saw before, who claimed to have developed the first thinking computer in the history of mankind. And they said that a necessary and sufficient condition for general intelligent action is that an agent be a physical symbol system. Okay, now a physical symbol system is something like a computer, or a physical symbol system can also be something like a brain, or it can be a mechanical thing. It can be the things that we have seen before. It could be made of Swiss cheese, if you know how to manipulate symbols with Swiss cheese. And he says, or Null and Simon say, that a necessary and sufficient condition is that a system be, for general intelligence, is that a system be a physical symbol system. Now, what does that mean? What does necessary and sufficient mean? Maybe we can, someone can explain what necessary and sufficient means. Would anyone, in Zurich care to comment? Simon, can we switch to Zurich? So it's still morning there, so I think maybe we can do some warm-up exercises for the people in Zurich.
So I think they all had their coffee, so I hope they're a bit more awake now.
So their brains should be lubricated. Okay, can we have a statement from Zurich?
So
necessary and sufficient. What does that mean? Phrased differently.
Anyone? I'm not going to give the answer this time.
But maybe Simon, you can do it yourself if nobody wants to volunteer.
I don't know if I'm really capable of that. Well, basically it seems that it's the only condition. I mean, basically, if you have a physical symbol system, then you can have actually what you want, namely an intelligent system. And, well, personally, I'm just wondering if it's really sufficient. I mean, so far, do we know any computer? Because computers are physical. I mean, you can touch them. There are symbol systems.
Okay.
And still, I'm not really quite sure about how intelligent they are. So I don't know if maybe students want to comment more about that. The starting point. Well,
okay, Simon, I think you're making the essential point. So necessary means that a system which is not a physical symbol system cannot possibly be intelligent. Right? That's necessary condition. Sufficient condition means that a system that is a physical symbol system has at least the potential to be an intelligent system. Now, just imagine now, if we have a system, a physical symbol system that is an implementation of a Turing machine that can implement computation, it doesn't matter how physically it's implemented, but it has to be implemented, then we have a system that can basically perform any kind of computation, and so basically we have the potential for an intelligent system. Right? So that basically opens up this. Now, Joel and Simon did not say that is the case. They said this is an empirical hypothesis. They say, let's see how far we get with this hypothesis and whether it turns out that this is wrong or not. They did not say it's correct, but of course they implied that it will be correct. And I think Simon, until he died, he really fought for this hypothesis. Okay, so that's the physical symbol systems hypothesis. Let me just make a very few points here about this idea of representation. So physical symbol systems basically have the capability of representation. Now, why, again, there is a huge debate in the literature, philosophical, psychological, computer literature, artificial intelligence, about representation. What is the nature of representation, and so on and so forth. Why is it important? Why did people like Simon say, okay, representation is the basis of intelligence? Okay, his idea was that maybe, you can reactive systems can react to sensory stimulation in the environment, You get a large object coming at you fast, you move away, right? So you react to sensory stimulation. Now what Simon said is, if you can think about something which is not actually present in the current situation, that you cannot perceive, then you have to build a representation of this, and then you can reason about this in the absence of this actual situation. So this is a very important notion, being able kind of to manipulate the environment mentally in the absence of the proper sensory stimulation. That's the nature of representation. And here is kind of the upshot of what this is. This would be the real world. And you always have this. This would be the real world. And this is the representation. Okay? Now you have an encode operation. So this is just a table and two blocks. And here you say block, and table. And block B is in block A. So you have an encode operation. And then you have an operation here. And then you have a move operator here. You apply this to the representation. You have a decode. And then the law, there is something called the law of representation. Oops. Okay, there is something called the law of representation. And it means that if you go this way, you get the same result than going this way. That's essential, and that's also what's sometimes called, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, just a modeling relationship. That's what a model is all about. So that you can perform the operations on the representation. You have an operator that transforms the situation back into the real world, and you get the same result. But that's just very basically the notion of representation, okay? Oh, oops, no break now. No. Okay. Now this idea, please read about this also in the book. I can't go into more detail here. This approach is sometimes also called GoFi. Does anyone know what GoFi means? GoFi? Here in Tokyo? Anyone GoFi?
What's GoFi?
It's a joke.
Anybody?
It's kind of a joke.
Good old-fashioned AI.
That's right. Good old-fashioned artificial intelligence. Okay. Now, this approach, there's a whole research area and has generated many subfields. So, and here I have a list of the subfields that classical artificial intelligence is kind of dealing with. Now, the reason I'm showing this is, I'm not going to go through this. You don't have to know this. There is a fundamental difference between what you see below here, especially the last two, and the rest. Now, what would be the difference here? What would be the fundamental difference here? Can anyone, for example, in Beijing, comment on this? In what ways do you think that the topic areas that we have up here mostly, maybe not, mostly differ from the ones that we have down here? Maybe we can have a brief comment from Beijing.
You can answer the question. I think the last one is active, and the other ones are positive. Positive.
They're what? Positive? Yeah. This one is. Can you say that again, please?
Passive.
I think he means passive.
Oh, passive.
Passive.
This is. Which one would be passive? This is active. And this one would be more. Okay. Okay. Certainly. It's interesting that you're saying perception and robotics, of course. I think robotics, of course, is active. Robots have to do something, otherwise we don't consider them very interesting, right? Now, perception, as we will see, is also a very active process. So I think you're absolutely right there. Now, most people will probably argue that thinking is also a very active kind of process, problem solving. And maybe we can say that up here, what we have up here is more to do with kind of cognition or internal processing, if you like. I put this in quotes, thinking. More to do maybe with thinking, so what's going on internally, rather than interaction with the real world. And here, I think we have the interaction with the real world, which is really at stake. So these don't really fit, into the whole framework. So you can imagine that computation or cognition as computation fits well with these, but may not fit so well with these. Right? That's the basic idea here. Okay, now, also if you look at this approach, this kind of classical approach has led to many, I think, very interesting results. And typically, like if you take search engines or text processing systems, you will find many algorithms in there that are based on, this idea of, just computation. But in some sense, it's kind of indistinguishable from people what do in computers in general. So there's no specific distinction because it's just about clever algorithms, right? So these are the successes, and whenever you switch on a laptop computer at home, you will have tons of algorithms that were developed in this framework. So I think there are, really many successes. But there are also failures. I think there are a lot of failures. And if you look at this, what can you say? What can you say, for example, about these things in contrast to the ones that you had before? It is like, recognizing and facing a crowd, visual perception, manipulation of objects. These are all things that are essential for natural forms of intelligence. And I think what's interesting about this is these things are easy for people. We don't even realize that we're doing very much when we're recognizing a face. I can see, Kuniyoshi Sensei sitting there, but I don't have to make an effort. I just see him, right? I don't say, now I really have to perceive, right? I'm just basically looking, and then I recognize the face. So it goes very easy for us. And this is why people also thought in early days of artificial intelligence, we just take a camera, we take a pattern recognition algorithm, we attach the camera to the pattern recognition algorithm, and we have a perception system. And, 40 years of research in the field have demonstrated that this is not the case. And there you get the power of the synthetic methodology. If you're actually just, observing people, recognizing faces, you will think it's an easy thing to do. Now, of course, we know it isn't. But if you're trying to build a system that can actually do that, an artificial system, you will immediately realize how difficult it is. Okay, so I think it's easy for people and hard for machines. Right? And actually, this stuff is easy for machines and hard for people. Anything to do with logical reasoning, people think that's very difficult. But it's very easy for machines. So I think you can probably say it's kind of vice versa. So, given that people were apparently not able to reproduce these effects here, to make machines that can perceive or manipulate objects or have common sense. Sort of in the 80s, 1980s, people started realizing, this approach is not going to go anywhere. So maybe we are doing something fundamentally different. And then, I just say, little progress in the sense. We did have good algorithms, but little progress in the sense of contributing to our understanding of natural forms of intelligence. That's the criticism, not the criticism. These were very good algorithms. Take chess, take the game of chess. Writing a computer program that can win against the world champion, that's a significant, very impressive achievement. So that's not the criticism. But the criticism would be that this has not taught us a lot about how human intelligence works. And that's the criticism. In that sense, little progress. Okay? Now, people started thinking about, well, what the problems might be. And then one of the, prominent critics was, of course, Rodney Brooks from MIT in Boston, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. And he said, well, forget about all this, with representation, symbol manipulation. Intelligence must be embodied. We always must consider the physical interaction of a system with the real world. Because if you look at evolutionary history, for example, organisms have evolved as physical organisms in the interaction with the real world. So intelligence must be embodied. And by the way, I can announce now, if you're interested, and I hope that you will be, on the 16th of December, Rodney Brooks is also a very outspoken visionary in the field. On the 16th of December, in our lecture here, we will have a live debate with Rodney Brooks that we will broadcast also, of course, over this global virtual lecture theatre. Rodney Brooks will then be joining us from his institute in Boston at MIT. For him, it will then be like 2:15 in the morning, but I think it should be no problem for him. Okay, so anyhow, he was very outspoken about, this idea of embodiment. And he said intelligence must be embodied. Okay. Now, if you look, there's a whole literature about this again. We could have I could go on, easy for 10 lectures about what the problems are with this approach. There's a whole literature, and again, we're making this short. This is chapter 3 in the book, the problems. So chapter 2 is the classical approach, chapter 3 is the problems with the classical approach. And I think it's everything to do with real world interaction. And I think it has to do also with this fundamental difference between real and virtual worlds. Okay. Now here is a list of some of these problems. I think maybe I can ask you to read about this for next week, and we can briefly come back to some of these. What I would like to do now to finish my part, before we go on to Professor Okada, who will then talk about the latest from Japan, I would like to mention a problem which is called frame of reference problem. I think one of the reasons why people didn't really understand this is because they didn't understand this frame of reference. Okay, let me just very briefly, and this is something you have to know. It's called Simon's Ant on the Beach. Okay, and this is again, Herb Simon, the inventor of the logic theory machine that we all know very well. And he wrote this lovely book called The Sciences of the Artificial. And I can really recommend that. It's also, you will find the reference in the textbook. Okay, assume that you have an ant. Here is the ant. The ant has found some food at this location, and the nest is at this location. So when the ant comes back, it will, perform a trajectory which is something like this. Now there are a number of issues here. First of all, well, if you look at this trajectory, oops, now it's gone. Okay, so we have the food here, we have the nest here. We have the nest here, so what the ant will do is it will perform a trajectory, something like a walk in a path like that. Now, what the ant will see, what the ant will actually see is, what we see is this trajectory. We see little puddles, we see rocks, we see pebbles, little twigs. But what the ant sees is something very different. So what we have here, I think, is an issue. So there are actually 3 issues, 3 points here. One is a perspectives issue. Perspective. So the perspective of the ant, because it has very different sensors, for example, very different eyes. We don't know what they hear, we don't know very much about what they hear, but, maybe biologists do, but I'm sure they hear very differently from the way we do. There is a perspectives issue that the world from our perspective looks very different from the world from the perspective of the ant. Right? Now, there's a second point, and that has to do, if you look at the trajectory, if you look at the trajectory, the ant goes this way, but this does not imply that this trajectory is stored in the brain of the ant. The ant doesn't store, go forward 2 meters, turn right, so the ant has maybe stored just the rule, go straight in this direction, and if there is an obstacle, just try to avoid the obstacle. Okay, so this is the second point, which is there is no storage of trajectory. Well, actually, let me make this shorter. No storage of the trajectory, or that's the issue of behavior. What we see, what we observe, is the behavior versus internal mechanism. The behavior is the actual path or trajectory that we observe, and the internal mechanism is maybe just a rule. If there is an obstacle on the right, turn left. If there is an obstacle on the left, turn right. Otherwise, go straight. Okay? Right. Now, there's another issue here. There's another issue, and that is the trajectory here may look very complex to us. But in fact, the mechanism that actually leads to that may be very simple. So this is called the complexity issue. Maybe just a simple rule. And then, as the ant interacts with the environment, we get an apparent complexity to the observer. But this does not imply that the mechanism that brings about the behavior actually has to be complex as well. Okay, now just to end my comments, let's make a thought experiment. Let's now increase the size of the ant by a factor of 1,000. Right? Let's make it just much bigger. And let's assume that again the ant, the big ant, the giant ant, is now here. Okay? Now, I would like to ask the students in Tokyo, you haven't been very talkative yet, to tell me the behavior of the ant. What will the ant be doing if it's 1,000 times bigger? We have the same environment, it's also found food, it wants to go back to the nest, it knows the nest is roughly here. What will happen? What does the trajectory of the...
how the ant will behave?
Of the ant
what will
look
be
like?
The trajectory? Anybody? You want?
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, the trajectories should be much more simple, because like small ant will see many stones, big stones that can, she needs to omit those stones, but like big ant should not have problems with stones, so I think trajectory will be simpler. Also, perhaps such ant should have different senses, because, it's different scale, different environment. So I mean, by all this means different architecture of the system.
Yeah. I think, different architecture, basically the idea is we take the same neural system for controlling it. We take the same environment. All we change is basically the embodiment. We just make it bigger. And what we see here is that actually we get a completely different trajectory. And so we see that by purely looking at the internal mechanism here, for example, by just looking at the internal mechanism, we cannot predict or understand the ant's behavior, right? So by looking at the internal mechanism only, and this is also a message that goes to people who like neuroscience, just if we want to understand the behavior of a system, it is not sufficient to look at the internal mechanism, to look at the brain itself. We have to look at how the brain is embedded in the organism and the interactions with the environment. I will come to this point many times. So if you want to understand the behavior of a robot, it's not sufficient to look at the control program. Okay, so this is the famous frame of reference problem. And what I would like to do now is, let's see, let me see. Yeah, right. So the last point that I want to make for today is, so there is a frame of reference competition. Now this problem, you may think, well, what's he telling us? This is so obvious. It's absolutely obvious what he's saying, right? It's trivial, and I agree. It is next to trivial. Now, it's amazing if you look at the literature. It's full of flaws, people confusing the frame of reference problem all the time. I mean, the literature, it's really awful. I mean, if you look at the literature, it's terrible. People confuse this all the time. So it's so important, this problem, that I wanted to mention it early on. You can read about it in chapter 4. And it's so important that I will be mentioning it during every single lecture. If you catch me not mentioning this problem, then you can choose either between, if you're the first to notice that I didn't mention it during the lecture, you can choose either between a bottle of champagne, which I have here, and if you don't like alcoholic beverages, you can have here a box of Swiss chocolate of about equal value. And the way we will do this is that this contest is for people who are attending the lecture in the halls. Only this is on the one hand to motivate you to actually attend the lectures, but on the other it's difficult to administer otherwise. So just when the latest from Japan is over, we will always have a question session. And during that question session, you should raise your hand, and if you're the first, you're entitled to one of these. Okay? So this is the frame of reference competition. This is either Swiss chocolate or champagne, whichever you prefer. Okay. Well, I think I'm done with my part for today. We have to. I would like to ask you. Let's see. Here's the. I would like to ask you to read about the fundamental problems for next week. What I would like to do now is, as every week, we have the speaker, and we like to combine what we're doing with the research. How people are kind of dealing with these concepts. Now, I'm very happy that today we have Professor Okada. I don't know whether, Yasuo, you want to make a short introduction, or whether... for me, from my perspective, what I find interesting is that, we talked about cognition or intelligence as a computational process. Now, what Professor Okada is doing, he's trying to take a very different position, namely intelligence as dynamics. Maybe he will tell you more about that. I have Yasuo, would you like to briefly introduce Professor Okada?
So today we have Professor Masafumi Okada. from our department, the Department of Mechano-Informatics, School of Information Science and Technology. And he's been, as Rolf presented, he's been working on two aspects. One about this dynamical systems model of cognition, and the other, actually, he's also working on innovative or novel mechanisms that goes with this cognitive systems approach, I think. So please, Professor Okada.
Thank you, Kunioshi-sensei. My name is Masafumi Okada. And today I will talk about the relationship of the intelligence, dynamics, and robot body. Okay. For the robot motion generation, there are 3 steps. And first, based on the sensor signal, it contains the information of the environment, and the robot motion is decided. It is executed in the motion decision system, and based on the decided system, the motion is generated. It is executed in the motion generation system. And through the robot body, the motion is realized in the real world. In this sequence, the intelligence is found in here. And the system defines the sensory motor map. So the intelligence of the robot is found in the sensory motor map. Next, I will talk about the detail of these 3 steps. The motion decision system is normally represented by the discrete event system, such as automaton. Each module has a label, such as the name of a motion, and the motion sequence is selected like walk, run, jump, and throw. In this system, because the optimization of the cost function plays an important role. So the intelligence is equal to the optimization. On the other hand, when the model of the environment exists, the model-based optimization is executed. And when the model of the environment does not exist, the model identification and the optimization of the cost function are executed simultaneously. This system looks more intelligent than this system. However, the model identification is the optimization program. So the intelligence of this system is all the same optimization. On the other hand, in the motion generation system, the reference signal and the feedback controller is prepared, and that means there are same number of controllers and references as the number of motion. And in this system, the most important thing is robust stability. So, robust stability against model uncertainty and disturbance. And so the intelligence is same as robust stability. So we have a big problems, and it is on the connection of the motion decision system and motion generation system. In the motion decision system, the time continuity is eliminated. That means the motion decision system is represented by the discrete event system. And in the motion generation system, the spatial continuity is eliminated. That means there are same number of motion, same number of controller and reference signal as a number of motions. So our problem is how to connect these two systems. They are exactly different systems. And the simple way is a direct connection between the label and the reference signal or controllers. Of course, to generate the reference signal and robust controller is difficult problem. However, many researchers or engineers succeed to realize this kind of motion using P2 or ASIMO or SDR. So maybe if you tried hard, it will be possible. There are some problems on the direct connections. The first one is a motion transition. The motion transition becomes not continuous and not smooth. And because the motion decision system eliminates the time continuity, the robot stops when the sensor signal is changed. And the motion decision system is based on the optimization problem. So if the answer cannot be found, the robot stops forever. And okay, go to the next slide. And so these days, a new approach to the intelligence is paid much attention. That is the use of dynamics. Dynamics means the dynamical system represented by the differential equation or difference equation. It is a little different from the physical meaning of the equation of the motion. And this concept is that when we think about something, our brain is entrained to some attractor, and that is closely connected to the memory, our memories. And the dynamics is timely and spatially continuous, so it enables the connection with the real environment in the real world and the body dynamics. Some biological evidence of the dynamics are reported. In the rabbit olfactory perception, the odor is seen. And for the unknown smell, the chaotic phenomena is seen. This result is reported by Professor Freeman. And in human brain, a dynamic transits from one stability to another through chaotic phenomena. And Professor Tsuda calls this phenomena a chaotic itinerancy. And these results show the close relationship of the intelligence and dynamics. Okay, I will talk about how can we use the dynamics for the robot intelligence. These figures show the relationship between the whole body motion and dynamics. consider the robot with N joints, and the posture of each time is represented as the point of the n-dimensional joint space. On the other hand, and so if the motion of the robot is cyclic, this motion draws the closed curved line in the joint space. On the other hand, consider the dynamics in n-dimensional space represented by this difference equation. And if this dynamics has attractor on this closed curved line, by checking the from the state vector of the dynamics, we can obtain the motion of the robot. The dynamics has an attractor, and that means the dynamics memorizes and reproduce the robot motion. And by the change of the configuration of the dynamics, the robot changes the motion. And we call this type of system a dynamics-based information processing system. And the challenge of the dynamics-based information processing system is as follows. It is a mathematical challenge. The first one is to design the dynamics which has attractors in n-dimensional space. And the robot with many degrees of freedom has many, the motion of the robot with many degrees of freedom has much information. And to design the dynamics in many dimensional space is difficult. So in reality, the motion reduction method is necessary. These are mathematically very interesting. However, not so interesting from the robotics and computer science point of view. So I will show only the results of the experiment. Could you start the movie? This movie shows the motion of the dynamics and the robot. The big circle shows means the robot motion, and the H-shape line means squat motion. And by the change of the configuration of the dynamics, the robot transits from walk motion to squat motion. And the next, please. And this is the experimental result of the real robot. It is a Fujitsu humanoid robot, Hope 1. It has 20 joints. However, we reduced the 20-dimensional motion to the 3-dimensional motion. Okay, stop.
So does that imply that in the dynamics the joints are no longer independent, but there are constraints between joints? Does this imply that the joints do not move independently anymore, but in the dynamics they're coupled through the dynamics?
Oh, yes. In the reduction method, we use the correlation of the joint angle. And so far, I talked about the information processing system. However, there is one more important element on the intelligence, that is robot body. For the smart body produces the smart intelligence, and the mechanical design for suitable mechanical design for robot is necessary. Like human-like, to generate the human-like motion and many functions, and to realize the dynamic interaction with the environment. And so we have developed the humanoid robot UT-theta with the concept of the body intelligence. And it has 3 special mechanisms. the cybernetic shoulder and double helical joint and backlash clutch. And first I'll talk about the cybernetic shoulder. The objective of the cybernetic shoulder is human-like motion. And this figure shows the motion of the human shoulder. The center of the rotation is not fixed. And this is a model of the cybernetic shoulder to realize this motion. And it is said that the human shoulder has 5 degrees of freedom. However, so if you want to exactly same human motion, you should design the 5 degrees of freedom mechanism. However, it has large volume and heavy weight. So we realize in 3-dimensional model with this human-like motion. Okay, start the movie 007. And this movie shows the fundamental motion of the cybernetic shoulder. By moving the center point, the end plate of the shoulder rotate twice angle as the center rod. So the workspace becomes large. And this motion, this mechanism generates the human-like motion that the center of rotation is not fixed. Okay, go to the next movie. 008. And this movie shows the demonstration of the cybernetic shoulder. And we developed the torso robot, and this is a karate motion. It is just only the demonstration, so the motion trajectory is programmed. And next, I will talk about the double spherical hip joint. The spherical joint means the 3 degrees of freedom joint. And the double spherical joint is a 6 degrees of freedom joint. It consists of 2 spherical joints, and the center of the rotation of 2 spherical joints is crossed in 1 point. And this mechanism realizes this motion, this roll motion, without bending knees. The normal humanoid robot always bends knees because of the control of the upper body. And by using this mechanism, the humanoid robot can control the center of gravity of the upper body without bending knee. And bending knee posture is fatal demerit of the robot. I calculate the energy consumption of the humanoid robot and assume that the body weight is about 60 kilogram. And so take this posture, and it requires about 58.8 Newton meter. And this is realized by 55.1 ampere current. And this current consumes the size AA battery. It is Tansan about only 10 minutes. So this posture is not fatal demerit. And next, I will talk about the backlash clutch of the knee joint. The backlash clutch means we implement the backlash on the joint, and the gap is very large. And the objective of this mechanism is to realize the free motion. And if the robot has free motion, the robot can realize the dynamic interaction with the environment. Please, movie 011. And this movie shows exactly free motion. The backlash is controlled to be constant, so the free motion is realized. And the next one. And this movie shows the motion of the backlash clutch. The gap is controlled, and the free motion is realized. And the next one, please. And we set the force sensor on the ankle, and by measuring the touch with the floor, the clutch on-off control of the clutch is realized. When the leg doesn't touch the floor, the knee joint is free. Okay. I will conclude my talk. In this talk, I focus on the robot intelligence, and I talk about the new approach of the robot intelligence. It is dynamics-based information processing system. And we have one more important element, that is robot body design for intelligence. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I think we have heard now about an alternative, an embodied approach to intelligence, and I will make this very short. We're already over time. I thank you for your patience. Just one comment. The idea now is that we start from these basic bodily motions because we think they're essential in building up higher levels of intelligence. So that's what we mean by building up intelligence from the bottom, and I think we have to start with ideas like this if we ever want to achieve higher levels of intelligence. So thank you very much. Thank you for your exciting presentation. Now, we're not quite finished yet because I want to talk about the assignment. We have an assignment for next week. Please read chapters 2 and 3 in the book Understanding Intelligence. For those who want to do this, the Zurich students have to do this. Do exercise number 2. That familiarizes you with the basic concept of the classical approach. And then we have a special assignment from Munich. Mark, is this okay for you? I think if you could organize that the people in Munich make a presentation, a short presentation, 5 to 7 minutes, as we had it from Beijing today, from Munich about this famous frame problem. Note that this is different from the frame of reference problem. The frame problem, and in there we will find, the R2D2 robot used by Dan Dennett. And I think if the Munich people could make at the beginning next week a short presentation about the frame problem, which is one of the fundamental problems of artificial intelligence. Do you think that's okay?
I think this is possible. We will work on this. I see some enthusiasm in the audience already. So yes, we will do this.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, thanks Mark to Munich, and thanks to everybody in the global virtual lecture theater for attending this lecture and for your patience. We were a bit over time, so I'll see you all next week. I'm available for questions now. So thank you very much, and see you next week.
Ja, wer möchte hieran mitarbeiten?
Yep.
Your field covered in this lecture. I was your website, these robots that you are building.
Yes.
And I have one question. I was thinking about